try and do. All right.
All right, I'm Kevin Staunton with the City Council, and we're out in the Grandview district for the next leg of our tour with Chuck Marohn today. And we've got Mark Nolan and Margot Baugh. Mark is the transportation planner for the city, and Margot is the director of business for the school district. And we're
Chuck Marohn back again. This is the third time we've done this, so we're good. We're getting good at this.
Right.
Yeah.
So we're just outside kind of a little park here across from Perkins that has the old Grange Hall and old schoolhouse that have been moved from different locations over time, and a lot of our schools use these for educational reasons, but the park gets kind of squandered here between the freeway off and this street here, and it's part of a big plan that we're trying to come up with to transform this area.
There's a Perkins, the history of Perkins Restaurant, which is right across the street. When they went to cities, they had all these sign ordinance problems, and so you guys heard that they came up with like their thing as being the really, really huge American flag. And so oftentimes located along these busy traffic corridors, you'll see the huge American flag, and that's the Perkins.
It's the brand.
It's the brand. It's part of the brand. So we're at half-mast today because of Ariel Sharon, Shimon Peres. Ariel Sharon was the former prime minister. Yep. This as a space is, I mean, I've seen some kids walking through here and stuff, and like you say, you got the park, but this is not people space, right? This is automobile space, and we've acquiesced and made some, concessions to the notion that there'll be people here. But I often wonder, is that even a smart thing to do in a place like this? So tell me what's going on. What are you trying to have happen in a place like this?
So this entire district is kind of an armadillo-shaped pattern bounded by 50th Street and Vernon curving across the north and Eden Avenue across the south. And it is bisected north-south by Highway 100, which is right behind us, and an old rail line, which is then further off to the west. It is home to our old Public Works facility and home to the school bus garage, which soon will be leaving as well. And we're trying to imagine the next generation of this area. It has a very robust convenience retail along Vernon west of 100. But we're trying to think about this space, and there's a lot of ideas that have happened with the Public Works site, as well as with maybe how we might bridge Highway 100 to take advantage of some developable property and make it more pedestrian friendly and bike friendly, and make it more of a destination to go along with that convenience retail.
What are the transportation things?
Well, we're going to take a look at that right now. Some of the big moves here first in terms of reorienting the access to Highway 100. Right now there's a lot of redundant ramps on and off Highway 100 in this area, and the idea here, once we go and take a look, is to consolidate those ramps, free up some more land, some more developable space for development that could front those roads, and then start from a transportation perspective to break up some of the very inaccessible area west of 100 into something that's much more of a friendly place for bicyclists and pedestrians in addition to automobiles. I mean, you'll see when we get over there that there's very little infrastructure for anything other than cars, and the plan really calls for knitting it together with the surrounding neighborhoods and bringing those folks in.
Let me ask, and obviously I've been here before. I've seen this side. I haven't done a whole lot over there, so this will be new to me. But my gut reaction over here, and kind of in light of, we're at the mall today. We're looking at the amount of underutilized space there, and imagining what could go there, and really, you could double the population of Edina in that space, in a well-designed way. We go to 50th in France, and we look at all the stuff going on there and think, okay, well, we could change this and change that and really kind of bring this along to the next level. That's a lot of energy in the city. Is there energy to do those two things, which are, to me, low-hanging fruit and really essential, and energy to do something here in what might actually be a good place for a public works building? You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and you'll see the catalyst for much of this is when the Public Works facility moved down to the location you were at this morning. It freed up some of this land, and then the school district looking to relocate their facilities. And then the talk kind of went from there. I think this has been a changing.
Well, yeah, but your point is a good one because it's a matter of priorities, right? I mean, from an economic sustainability perspective, how much can you be tackling at one time?
Right. Well, and I'll say this, not, trying to say anything negative about anyone, but oftentimes when we start a government project, we say, well, we have a public works building, we have an old school site, we should do something with these, we should make use of them, and then we become like the people with the property looking for the use. As opposed to saying, like, in a macro sense, here's our community needs, here's where the energy is, here's where things are going. And so I'm starting out this portion of the trip like a little skeptical that we're going down a road where we're going to pour a bunch of money in to try and make something happen where maybe it's not meant to, maybe that's not like the low-hanging fruit. You see what I'm saying?
Yep. And we did a pretty elaborate public engagement process to try to figure out the next use. Originally, there was just a swap arrangement with a developer that was going to sell the public works site and have it replaced with a medical office building with a parking ramp. And some residents said, wait a minute, that's not a good use of that spot. Let's rethink that. And now we've got some people really invested in the notion of turning it over, but a little bit of the perfect being the enemy of the good has crept in too, where we all want it to be perfect, but it makes it hard to make a decision. Yeah,
because you've got to, if this is going to work out, you've got to actually be able to work incrementally and pilot things. And I think of, like, in Minnesota, the Arden Hills site, which has been the bane of council after council after council up there.
The Ford plants.
Yeah, exactly. The Ford plant. Yes. Right. And what the approach is like we have this site and we keep trying to find ways to make it work. And the financing almost gets ridiculous, and we're willing to give away crazy subsidies and the reality is, when I step back and look at Edina, there's so much going on good here, and there's so much potential for what I think are like easy wins at the mall, at 50th, that this is kind of a high bar, And
one other dimension that I'd add to it is that rail line has the potential, and part of the planning process contemplated that potential to be a connection from the south up to where the Southwest Light Rail would be, and hence have a rail hub sometime in the future. That's a long play, but it's an interesting opportunity at that place in Heidelberg.
So are we going over there to look at this?
We're going to walk halfway across the bridge, take it out and come back, and then we're going to ride over there. Just wanted to get you.
Yes. There's nothing like walking next to, electric utility.
This is what we want to do.
This is, as engineers, this is environmental driving.
It is, and what I like to say is that I'm the only non-engineer in our engineering department. I'm a planner.
Oh, are you really?
I am, yes.
All right.
So the idea here, looking at ways, obviously, how do you connect this district that's bisected by this?
Right.
And that plan that we told you about earlier and the transportation plan looks at a pedestrian connection halfway between the bridge we're on now and Vernon Avenue to our north. As Councilmember Staunton alluded to is what was called a lid, now it's called the Grandview Green, looking at capping off the highway in between these two bridges to open up some more land for development, create some open space, that kind of thing. And we're really curious to see your thoughts about large infrastructure projects like that.
Let's deal with both of those.
Okay.
For video's sake, if we just move a little further away, we'll get better audio.
All right.
So, yeah.
I mean, if we just go across the bridge.
All right. I'm going to go back in half or put this up.
Okay.
All right?
Yeah, and you get a sense of the pedestrian unfriendliness of this bridge as well.
Right. So, let's talk about a pedestrian ramp first. If we think about, say, a crosswalk or a sidewalk as a way to move someone from one place to another, we could build a crosswalk for like pennies per foot. We can build a sidewalk for dollars per foot. When we build a pedestrian ramp, we're talking about hundreds of thousands, tens of thousands of dollars per, thousands of dollars per foot, right? We're talking like massive sums of money. So really, from a financial standpoint, the only way a pedestrian bridge makes a lot of sense is if there's so much wealth here in the thing you're going to cross that it's worth blowing some money on a pedestrian bridge, or you're moving so many people from one important place to another important place that it's worthy of the investment. We have neither of those things here.
Yeah, it strikes me that the math is a lot of what you talked about this morning. We would have to get enough value from the newly developable land that could be created on the shoulders of Highway 100 in order to pay for the infrastructure to create that.
Yes.
And not only now, but to maintain it in the future.
That's so true. And what we see a lot of times is that these pedestrian ramps are built largely because they're coming out of like big slush funds of money. We wouldn't pay for it here, but we could get a Tiger Grant or the DOT to, front some of this. And so then it becomes like, well, yeah, even though, 40 people a day will walk over it or 10 people a day, who cares? It's not our money. And I'm not going to push back on that, like reflexively. Like sometimes we do crazy things and might as well spend the money as someone else is going to spend it. But I think if we're looking at it from the city standpoint, it's clear that there's not enough pedestrian activity here to justify that.
You'd be creating a new place. You can't think of it as just a bridge.
Right,
It'd
right.
have to be a plaza, basically.
Right. So,
which is even more expensive.
Yeah. So, like, pedestrians can walk through here now.
Right.
This is really not nice. But what you would want to see before you made an investment like that is a lot of people walking through this space. And actually, if you got a lot of people walking through this space, some of the things you could do would be to, put some striping in, put some bollards in, and actually squeeze the traffic a little bit away from the edge here to give the pedestrians a little bit more room so it feels a little bit better.
Right.
You could do things like that would be pennies.
Yeah.
As opposed to that if you wanted to try to get people moving back and forth.
Those are some of the earlier steps in this larger plan that we've been talking about, is to make those kinds of improvements on both of these bridges, and that pedestrian connection. It's a 15, 20 year, really, it's in one of our long-term steps. And the idea is that by then you would hope that you would have those generators for pedestrian activity.
Yeah, well, and I think that's where you start. Start with a small incremental thing. I think that when we're talking about capping the highway, I'm vaguely like working with some people in Austin, Texas, trying to do this. They're great people. They're brilliant. They've got a lot of really good ideas, but they want to do a mile, I want to say, and it's $1 billion. It's a massive amount of money. You're not doing that much, but the whole thing of it is that when they're capping it, these are places where growth has come up to this and stopped.
Bursting at the
and it's like, it's pushing up and it's just grinding. And if they did this, they would be able to cash flow it by just selling the land. I mean, it would be a huge thing. When we look out here, it's very clear you have wasted space. It's very clear that this could be a much higher use. And it's also very clear that both sides of this would benefit from not having a highway here and having something more than just a little, walkway across. Does that reach the level of justifying capping it?
Or maybe it's incremental. Maybe you do that development now and you wait to see if you need to cap it later once the demand kills the balloon that far.
To me, I think if engineering wise, our engineers are saying, like, logistically, if we were going to cap a highway, we wouldn't do it over there, but you've got the topography here where, like, we could do it, we could do it, and it wouldn't be like a heroic effort. Now, I'm thinking in my brain, all right, what kind of development do I need to get over here? How does that need to be oriented and so that it doesn't screw up that possibility? What do I need on this side? How does that need to be oriented? And maybe you're working to something where 20 years, 30 years from now, we haven't shut that off as a possibility, but we also haven't committed to doing it. So we have this as an option that would be really great, but if we get a lot of stuff going. Does that make sense?
It does.
Yeah.
Walk down and meet
Oh, okay.
here, so we can walk the rest of the way to get to that.
Yeah, it's great because you can see the, just geographically how it would work. I mean, I can see why a great set of engineers
It's tempting.
and planners would look at that and say,
Right.
topographically, that makes a lot of
Wait to
sense.
happen,
Right, right. And
But maybe it's a timing thing rather than a.
yeah, well, and you also identify Highway 100 as, serving a valuable purpose within the community, but also being this huge negative and that it divides this area. How do we fix that?
Yeah, so I guess we're just going to jump in and run just across the block.
Yep, let's do it. Thanks, Tara.
Of course.
Yeah, thank you. All right.
Seatbelts on.
Oh, yes.
Mark, you're going to have to tell me where to turn in for this.
Sure,
next
and
one.
just go ahead and turn right at this next intersection. And the idea here was, depending on time, we can get out and discuss, or I think we should probably just
So right here?
right and left. Yep, this is the location of the old public works facility.
Okay. And why was this moved? It's just old building?
Yeah.
Right in
Building,
here- right into here?
obsolete. We've been looking for years for ways to replace it, and initially made a decision with a developer who owned a piece of property down on the south side of town to swap.
Yeah.
And we would take that property and build a new public works site, and they would
Anywhere's
take this
fine.
property and redevelop it.
Okay.
And then that met with some resistance about this property. We proceeded with the public works site, but then we've been planning for what to do with this property.
So the train tracks in use?
Yes.
About twice a day, freight.
Okay.
Been some increase as Cargill has had more and more interest in sending stuff down the Mississippi River to New Orleans and to the Gulf.
Sure.
And otherwise no use. It does go through a lot of backyards of single-family homes, both
Okay.
here in Edina and north in St. Louis Park and south in Bloomington.
Okay. But this isn't part of any. There's no. The Met Council doesn't have any regional plans to run a rail stop through any of this. And
They
Not
don't.
currently.
It's not
Yeah.
on their plan.
Yeah.
It's
Okay.
Although it is in the Tier 1, there's some folks in southern Minnesota who are working on trying to get rail connection from Owatonna Northfield, Mankato
Right.
north, and this is one of the kind of the western option of the two options.
This just feels like dead space to me. Like, I mean, you sit here, and this is a piece of property. There's no. It's not connected to anything there.
Mm-hmm.
It's not connected to anything there. So it's like a single use. And for me, it's kind of like, okay, what can you, in the short term, get that would be something that you're not going to worry about all that much? Is it just empty ground? That's not the worst thing. You do have utilities here, and I saw the manhole covers and all that. So it's a public works building. I'm guessing you had all the utilities and everything here. So you've got an investment. I think the question becomes, how much time and effort do you invest in this, and what does that take away from anything else? This feels to me like the kind of place where you would have storage sheds or a salt storage building. Like this feels
is
like a
what it
public
was.
works site,
Mhm.
right?
We did store salt there.
It was that, and in fact did have storage up on the
Yeah.
north side of the property.
Because I mean, you're not like you said a hospital was looking at this site. Is that what someone said?
a medical office building.
Because
And there is a medical office building around the corner that's a little strapped for space.
okay,
The upshot of the framework that the process came up with was the notion of some public use, perhaps a community center, combined with some private use to try to be a catalyst for more private development and creating more of a destination on this side of the tracks as opposed to the convenience retail on the other side.
well let me gently push back on the community center idea, because I this is kind of what we talked about at the beginning. I see this all the time, where a city will say, got land, need use. Boy, libraries are great, community centers are great, convention centers are great. If we started with that, like we want a community center, and we didn't look at who owned what land, but we just said, where would be like the optimum place for this? School districts do this all the time, and no offense to school districts, but they'll say, we need a new facility. Where can we get the cheapest land, or where do we own cheap land? As opposed to where do the, transit lines, walkable spaces, where does all this stuff like line up to be the optimum site? Just from what I've seen today, if you were talking community center, the mall area, it has nothing but space, and this huge need to actually occupy that space with stuff. And if you can get people who would want to live in that area, and you can put a community center like nestled within that with some nice, very good urban design, there's tons of space to do it, and you could do it brilliantly, and it would be a huge asset. You put that same facility out here, how do I get to it? I got to drive. Now you're not doing yourself any favors, right? Is it going to create value for the properties around it? Not really. I mean, no one in that building is going to say, wow, this building is now great because the community center is right across the street. So you lose out on a lot of the benefits of building a building like that when you start with the site and then try to find a use for it. I think as governments, we're in a long game, and unlike a private developer, our holding costs for this site are really, really low. So we can say, how do we just hold this site and not let it suck energy from other places? How can we get something in here that would be like a short-term use that would give us a little bit of tax base but wouldn't cut out of our development potential in any places? And how do we keep ourselves open to someone who might come in with a big idea that we haven't thought of that might be a good fit for here? But like, I would never lose sleep over this site being vacant. Not for the next decade or two, personally. Because you got so much other stuff to do. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's. I mean, we've had a lot of what's happened is that a lot of folks have gotten invested in what to do with this, and a little bit of what you talked about this morning was resonating with me because it suggested that we're a little paralyzed by wanting to make it perfect. And the last go around we had for a combination of housing, community center, and structured parking was $45 million. And
right.
That just, I think, from a council perspective, we all said, "Whoa, that's a lot of money." And how is that really going to work? And if we do that, has the potential for a big deal, not a small deal. And if you do it wrong, then you're really stuck.
And I think, we can think incrementally about this site, but the big drawback of this property is that it's really not connected to anything. So what you're trying to do is like incubate something in a vacuum, as opposed to create a synergy with something around, a draw off of something around it. And that just makes your burden like a whole lot higher.
Well, yeah, we think about the chicken and egg aspect of it because the overall plan for the area and for this site looked at making some of those connections, putting a new bridge across the tracks up here to connect to the area we're going to look at in a little bit. Making a much more direct connection to this street, making this a more pedestrian street coming up the hill and those kinds of things. But again, that's infrastructure investment that has to come along with the private.
And if you told me that I could, spend $5 million on pedestrian bridges and pedestrian improvements here, or I could spend $3 million in your core neighborhoods, like fixing little gaps in your pedestrian, you're going to get way higher return on investment going where people are today struggling to get places on foot, rather than go to a place where they're not trying to get to, and then try to entice them to come here.
It's a pretty good segue to where we're going to go next in terms of small investments in the pedestrian infrastructure.
Okay. There's a lot of times that, and I'm not suggesting you guys are doing this, there's a lot of times that planners get a bad rap because we often talk about, well, we need to make these pedestrian improvements. And the only place we get to kind of go out and do that and experiment with that is the places that nobody cares about, because they're like, hey, whatever, there's nothing going on there, and they won't, fight and resist. And you wind up with a lot of these kind of white elephant things where you've got bridges that nobody uses and trails that nobody goes to.
Well, and one of the things that has happened is you're segueing from the east side. The first two places you look were the east side of Highway 100, the east side, the older side of the community, to the relatively newer side of the community. Is this side of the community was really developed in the post-World War II. Everything is designed around automobiles. So the distances are longer, there are fewer sidewalks, and so we're doing a lot more retrofitting to make it feel pedestrian friendly and to allow people with bikes or on their feet to cover these distances.
You could turn left right here and we'll...
Right. But these places, you know, are all, I think these are the kind of places that are probably the most challenging to deal with today, because everything is split into a pod. You know, each of these restaurants, each of these places, each of these gas stations, they're all split into a separate pod, and they're not they're designed to be separate.
Right, and that you drive to them.
And you drive even to places that are next door to each other.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And so what we're trying to do is go in and actually retrofit those to be something that they're not. You're almost trying to Frankenstein them, right? Like they're not made to be what we are trying to make them. And so in the triage that is city government, you either have to say, that's not a low-hanging fruit, we're not going to do it, or we're going to accept a long struggle to make this work, or we're going to put a heroic amount of money in to try, and I'm always leery of that.
Or maybe that you're going to incrementally try it.
Right, and that's the long game.
Yeah.
We're going to incrementally try it, but then you have to have long game kind of expectations,
Right.
which are not pedestrian bridges and
Right.
you know,
But it might be narrowing Vernon. We'll see that.
Oh,
as we
yeah.
walk up
Yeah.
there. Some ideas we've got from a transportation infrastructure.
what's the parking ramp for?
So the parking ramp is actually owned by the city, but there's an arrangement with Gary's Food.
And nobody charges for
And
parking there.
it's free parking. But it
Because
is,
what this city needs is way more free
but
parking.
it is massively underutilized. There is an office tower associated with that building, and those folks use it. But generally, the shoppers at the grocery store don't use it. They use the surface parking that's out in front of the grocery store.
Sure.
And one of the reasons why I thought we could stop in this sort of no man's land here is that this area is used by commuters that park in that ramp and along here, and they have to walk through here, this is actually a public right of way through this area.
Yeah.
And across the street to Vernon to their bus stop, and I thought we would
Oh, really?
take a look at
Okay.
this 'cause during the planning process of the transportation plan.
Yeah.
It's really weird. Most
Okay. So you've got a surge of people morning and night right here.
right, and we're not talking about hundreds of commuters.
Right.
But it's enough
But it's
people.
kind of we call it hide and ride. This is where it's kind of an informal place to park and ride. It's not a formal.
Where am I commuting here? Downtown?
Yes.
Yes, you are.
The bus picks up and goes right down 50th Street.
Okay.
Heads into.
So I'm getting on a bus here and I'm ending up in downtown
work.
Minneapolis.
Yep.
Wow. Okay. Well, that does give this like a different flavor, because now you've got one of the essential ingredients. You actually have people here for a period of time.
Your destination.
Right? Yes. And so now you really can start to think incrementally. Because you're not starting, like the public works side, it felt like we were starting from nothing.
Right.
This feels like maybe we're starting from a little bit more than that. And there's some potential to, so people walk through here. Yep. This isn't horrible. I mean, it's really not good for people, but it's not horrible because of the speeds and the scale. No one's going to get up to 40 miles an hour in here.
Zigzag street.
Yeah, because of the geometry of the street. But the question becomes, how can we make this a little bit nicer for people? And then start to fill this out a little bit. So where's the actual bus stop?
They wait here.
Right where it says bus on
In
the
the
side of
morning.
the.
You're joking. Right here in the middle of this?
Yeah.
Yep.
And then there's another 2 of them further down Vernon.
We have one shelter in the area that we won't probably walk down as far. There's only one actual shelter. And they let off at this location by that bench right there in the evening.
Okay, so we have a pretty despotic set of bus
Not
stops
very
here.
inviting.
No, not. We don't really. Yeah. So this street is problematic because of the speeds.
Right. It
And
actually used to be 169.
oh, are you joking me?
No,
Really? This
no,
was the highway. So you can. Is this a county road now?
Yeah.
It's a county road up to the bridge, and it's ours on the other side.
So you can see how the geometry's here. You know, cars are coming through here 30, 40 miles an hour. It's just not conducive to people crossing here.
Right.
They can do it, they can physically make it happen because you've got crosswalks and signals. But if you look at the curve radius, if you look at, you know, the distance you've got to cross, all of this just makes it very uncomfortable. You get a day where it's 5 below and you got to stand in that corner and wait for the light to turn, and then you get to mosey your way across with, you know, traffic going at this is not an inviting environment. So the question would be, how do we, in this little stretch here, doesn't have to be for miles, but in this little stretch, slow things down, tighten up this intersection a little bit. Ideally, we would not be concerned about vegetation and fences on the corner. We'd actually be concerned about getting building up here on the corner and start to think of this as a node in a network, as opposed to you know, a despotic bus stop that's an afterthought.
And in terms of traffic and congestion, this is our busiest intersection in the Grandview district. Right.
Really?
It is.
Because there's a whole residential neighborhood that if you go up and around is up
Yeah.
there, and there's a whole residential neighborhood if you go down.
What are you
this
talking
way.
about in terms of ADT then?
Well, we got about 18,000
Okay.
on Vernon here.
Yeah.
20,000 as you start to get towards the ramps
Okay.
across the bridge.
Okay, it's a
And
healthy amount of traffic.
It is, but you know, we already have started to think the transportation plan started to look at
Yeah, let's
and
do
walk
that.
down Vernon a little bit, so we get a feel for that.
Have you had any discussions about actually getting rid of the signal? And making this, I mean,
There have been, well, you've seen a few roundabouts, kind of, right? And I don't think we have an intersection project come up without someone talking about a roundabout, and this is one of those locations. And at the moment, the right-of-way is just really too tight.
Too tight?
To make that happen. Now, that's not to say that something couldn't happen in the future. if
Yeah.
These which runs down Interlochen for a ways over these last couple of years.
Oh, okay. I see that. One of the challenges that we run into is that when we get to a section like this where we're handling volumes of traffic, the engineers design them to work at speed, the roundabouts. And to do that requires a huge amount of land. And it really is not conducive to like a neighborhood. Doing a tighter roundabout, so it would be a lower speed roundabout. But it would be one where you'd have continuous flow and people would get through here a lot quicker. But you'd be talking about, you know, 15 to 20 miles an hour instead of 30 to 40 miles an hour for a 2 or 3 block stretch.
Well, the idea then with that 3-lane section is that the engineers thought we could do that up till this point, because it changes down to a 2-lane section a ways down the road, and so continue that up to here.
Yeah.
And then they thought, well, we got to maintain the 4-lane section from this point on because of all that
volume,
traffic. So I
right.
guess maybe we'd be dealing already. We'd have to deal with that with a 1-lane roundabout.
It would be really, you know, you look over here, and I mean, all this stuff is pushed back. Ideally, over time, if this develops as a node, this gets tighter. Everything moves in a little bit more, and you benefit from on-street parking and that kind of thing. But today,
One of the notions is that we could collapse this 4-lane to a 3-lane,
Right.
and you could pick up some pedestrian and bike
yeah,
elbow room.
I think that might be a good transition strategy. Yeah. But I wouldn't put it any more active. You know?
One of the issues we're dealing with this crossing, work our way down Vernon a little bit, and we got a residential neighborhood over here. Fargo, that's the location that we're looking at, actually putting in a signalized intersection for pedestrian crossing purposes.
Oh, really?
And improving the crosswalks, and Commissioner Staunton talked about freeing up more space. Because this obviously is very tight. I'm walking right in this.
Okay, so we're walking along here. You guys have spent the money on vegetation, right? Or the county has, somebody has. But as for the county engineers, this vegetation is fine because when a car comes through here and goes off the street, they hit that and it doesn't matter, right? You'll notice, and maybe we'll, yeah, let's go look at this. Yeah, okay. So you can't really tell right underneath it. I know the signals it's more obvious. But they build these posts so they're breakaway. So when the vehicle exits the roadway and hits the post, it'll give. And it's less intense on the driver. Well, what does this vegetation and this post have in common with you? We're all breakaway. If a car comes out the road and hits you, you're not going to stop the traffic or injure the driver. And so really, the engineers don't ponder much when they're designing this about you. What if they did? Well, the first thing is that we would slow traffic down. We'd have narrower lanes for the stretch where we're putting people right next to it. But we're also walking, and I realize it's September, it's a nice day out. We like the sun, but boy, it would be nice to have shade through here.
Yeah.
A row of trees would not cost all that much, would really add a lot to this, and would make this walk a lot better. Why wouldn't you do that? Because you don't make breakaway trees. And so,
You start to feel some of the
Yeah.
lane width, then
Yeah.
the tree is further off from the traffic, and you slow the traffic, and you start to...
I think the key is in the slowing of the traffic. If you hit a tree going 10 or 15 miles an hour, it's not going to, you wouldn't want to do that to your car repeatedly, but no one's going to die. You hit a tree at 45 miles an hour, you're going to have concussion, it's not going to work out well. So yeah, slowing down, and we're not talking about bringing traffic to a crawl here. What we're talking about is that for a stretch where we would like humanity to be able to flow back and forth here, where we'd like it to be safe, because it doesn't feel safe right here, right?
I reach over and
Yeah,
get
I
these
know.
guys further from
I
the
know.
traffic.
We're talking about slowing down cars for a little bit, and we can actually improve travel time and compensate for the slowdown in speed by improving the functioning of that junction, of that intersection, making it continuous flow so you don't have to sit and go zero. You can just go through, albeit at a slower speed. That's, to me, that would be like a very first start with this kind of.
And there's a whole neighborhood over here that feels cut off from here. So they
Oh,
get
yeah.
in their car,
Yeah.
and they go all the way around and come through that intersection to
Right.
come over here and park when they're just a couple of blocks
Yeah.
from the grocery store or
would it
the
be better
hardware
to
store
just
or whatever.
flow? Right. And that's how you transform a city, is to start to make it so that, not that we always want people to be able to drive. Driving is always going to be an option, and it's going to be an option that's going to work for a lot of people. But you'd like them to be able to have other options too. And right now, walking is really not an option. It's not a viable option. So engineers hate skew intersections. This is a skew intersection. It doesn't come in at a 90-degree angle. In this type of an environment, skew intersections are dangerous. But in general, skew intersections are amazing features. I mean, now we're standing in the shade. Isn't this so much nicer? Yeah. Skew intersections are a chance to do all kinds of things, and skew. This
doesn't have a street across.
yeah, well, you see how this street comes in at an angle? Right. Engineers hate that. It freaks them out. They're like, you can't do that because you don't have straight sight lines. Yet, when we're doing like good urban design, skew intersections, people get like really excited about, like, wow, because they do really well with the architecture of the space, the way you do the landscaping. There's a ton you can do with skew intersections.
And they help the driver drive more cautiously.
And they actually slow down traffic, yeah. Yeah, because you're worried about getting pummeled. That's the real like dichotomy that's kind of hard for us to grasp sometimes, because we're all drivers too, is that we spend all this time and money making places safe for cars, for people driving. We want them to feel safe driving, when actually streets become much safer when the driver feels a little bit endangered.
Right.
When the driver feels endangered, they're more heightened and aware, and those collisions that you're not expecting don't happen nearly as often or as intense.
So what do you do in a situation like that? Because we as staff and our council and commission is very supportive of that kind of concept in terms of friction along the roadways.
Yeah.
But it's very counterintuitive to a lot of our residents and some drivers where we're narrowing lanes, or wanting to narrow lanes and put some trees and other things in there, and we have residents that'll tell us, we can stop right here for a second. Otherwise, right?
Well, I think the user experience is not where to collect your data. And to me, the way we start to address that issue is by collecting data. So we say to people, all right, you're trying to have an environment that is safer. Here's the objectives that we're trying to get at here. Let's measure before and after this project. And here's then the data. And what people will come in and they'll say, well, I don't like it as much because, and they won't really be able to put a finger on it. Like, oh, why do you care about people walking? Why do you care about, we're just trying to get to where it's tangled up mess. And we can go to them and say, look, we're actually getting more traffic through there in less amount of time. The speeds are a little bit lower, but you get to your destination more quickly. Here's the data. And I actually think that is one place, blunting criticism, okay? You're not going to convince people with data. Convincing people with data doesn't work. You got to convince them with a story, explanation, a vision. But rebuffing criticism, data works really well. And we can set up really good data collection through here and show huge improvements.
Because the problem with the transformation is this feeling that there'll be winners and there'll be losers. So yes, it'll be better for these folks, but the folks down the road who are trying to get to 100 in the morning are going to say, wow, now I can't, now it's 5 minutes longer for me to get to work in the morning. Why is that?
The crazy thing is, though, I think you could do this where it would take less time to get to work too. That's the strange place we're in. You take a place like this and you have the right to drive 30, people drive 40. When the light's green, that's your prerogative. When the light's red, you have to drive 0. Well, the light's red a lot. You gotta sit here a lot. I mean, we used to watch people back up. What if instead of having that trade-off, 0 or 40, you just had all the time 20?
People feel better. You always feel better when you're still moving.
Yeah, you would actually find that people would get to where they're going more quickly, even though it's at a lower speed, because you didn't spend time going 0.
So I'd like to bring two of these discussion points together in terms of pedestrian safety and roundabouts or other ways to slow traffic down. And in this instance, this is where people want to cross. And so our plan calls for turning this into a signalized intersection for the sole purposes of getting pedestrians across the way with crosswalks. So we looked at the interlocking intersection back there. What are your thoughts about pedestrian activity at roundabouts, and the cars aren't stopping? So then how do we
Doesn't that
deal with
seem like a waste, though? I mean, because a signalized intersection not only costs a lot of money to build and costs a lot of money to maintain, but it wastes people's time. Like, if you want to screw up a commute, just put in a bunch of signals, because it wastes people's time just sitting there doing nothing. But you look at this, and you're telling me there's people from here that are regularly crossing over to there.
residents or
that is okay. So
somewhere along.
Right.
You need
This
more
is where they come
porosity
to.
from there to here.
Right. So now what we've got here is we have a corridor from there to there, 800 feet, 1,000 feet maybe. You've got 1,000 feet where what we really need is a more, and I'll use the word permeable, but more just You need more flow of people crossways, and they can't do it because this is a moat,
Right.
and it's a moat because of the speed of the traffic. To me, before I spent money here putting in a signal, I would want to do something to try to just slow the speed down.
Maybe you narrow the road first.
I would do a-
signal later.
I would do a
Past here for
I
40
mean,
years.
right here, I think that in this section here, we could do a little experiment. We don't have to go spend a ton of money, but we could get some cones out, and we get some paint out, and we could narrow these lanes through here, just from the essay to the holiday, two icons, of, you know, the kind of, you know, typify this section. From the essay to the holiday, we could narrow this down. We could hypothesize what would happen, right? Collect some before data, ADT, traffic speed, all that. Come out here with cones, put a little, you know, space in the middle here that was like a refuge for people trying to cross. Basically what you're doing is you're narrowing the gaps so that people don't have as far to cross. When you slow the speed and narrow the gaps, it means people can flow. Let's do that for a week or 2 weeks, and then measure the data and see what happens. See how people respond. Do people avoid this area altogether? Do they go through more slowly? Do we handle fewer cars, more cars? What are the results? And I think we would learn a lot from that.
The other dynamic that happens here is you go further down, it eventually connects with Crosstown.
Yeah.
And Crosstown going east in the afternoon jams up with Gleason,
Insane.
and they get off and they come up here and they get on 100 going north.
Right.
And so there's a whole bunch of cut-through traffic that comes
Right.
through here in the afternoon, and everybody trying to take a left turn out of the neighborhoods into it can't do it because it's all gunned up.
And that doesn't help you here.
Right.
And so, yeah, you become like the car sewer, the overflow car sewer.
Yeah. Oh,
And
right.
you know, but look, you've got
But
kids
I
on
wonder
bikes
if you
here.
narrow it, if the signal
girls.
starts getting sent to others, that to the cut-throughs, that's not a very viable cut-through.
Right. Okay. What was the deal there? See, you got two kids on bikes, and that's great. I mean, don't we want? I mean, those kids were like 10, 11, 12 years old. I think as a community, we want kids that are 12 years old to feel independent, to be able to bike places, right? I mean, that's kind of that's part of maturing that we lose in a lot of places like this. But do we really want kids 3 feet away from cars going 40 miles an hour? No, you don't. You don't. There's enough humanity here. There's enough. I mean, there's people walking. There's stuff to go to. Very different than that public works site. There's actually things going on here that I think you could turn this in a couple decades of incremental changes into a nice little street. But just this strip. Don't try to be heroic and say we're going to do a streetscape a mile in each direction. Let's just fix this little part here. Make it, you know, make some incremental changes. Try it out. What works, make permanent, and then, you know, focus on adapting this over time so this development moves in and complements the street.
All right, we're getting the signal, so it's time to move on.
All right. Oh, we're going driving again. Edina does screening better than anybody else. You guys are like obsessed with screening everything, which I get it. He's like, I don't want to look at that, so we put up a big wall of screening.
After at 50th and France.
Right, exactly. No, well, you are doing it a little bit,
But I'm a big fan of observe the target field.
yeah,
I think what they did there was very clever.
it was very clever. That was actually one of the first things I noticed when I went there. I'm like, that
It's
is
almost
really
a sculpture in you that serves as a screen.
right. Right.
But with respect to this, your observation was going to be that
Well,
should we not worry so much about it, or just pull it further out?
No. What's okay? Suburbs have perfected the concept of screening. And
As a buffer between residential and commercial,
yes,
instead of
What-
having them live with each other.
what we have done in suburban areas is we have said we will accept development that is ugly, disrespectful, and just like, you know, not great, as long as we can buffer it and don't have to look at it. So you have a building here. I mean, Wells Fargo, I'm not going to suggest that they're not a good company, but that's a hideous building. And I wouldn't want to be a neighbor to that. You know, you've got residents and homes back there. What do you got in between? You've got a thick thing of screening. Does that really address the problem? Would it be better if that building was just more respectful to its neighbors in its architecture and orientation and design, so that you didn't have to have this kind of fake screening to try to pretend it's not there?
Or the next generation of whatever develops on that site ends up doing that instead of it serves as a bridge between the single family residential and this more commercial area.
So
we could stop right in here.
We can look at like the Disney Corporation at their theme parks, which are so highly sculpted and managed for views and all this. It's some of the most intense space in the country. They don't do hardly any screening. The screening is like the last resort. Everything is designed to actually not be offensive, right? Cities, we just say, you know, you can build something ugly, we'll just.
And one of the reasons I wanted to stop here last was to talk about some other connections that we're looking to make. So we have some condominiums over here and an office, a library, senior center where you'll be your next event. And we have a lot of people that cross at this location, walk up this hill in the wintertime. You can imagine what this is like.
Yeah.
Kind of walk over that high curve just to get to Jerry's to get lunch.
Right.
To get coffee.
Yep.
And so on one of our early moves we discussed, and it could be coincident with, this is the bus garage site that we discussed earlier that would potentially be another use here. Actually extend the road, put a roadway through here. It's a little roadway, but it's something to give some access and make a real intersection here. Because you can see we have sidewalks that end once you get out there in the middle of the intersection.
And to orient you, the public works site is just on the other side of the railroad tracks from there.
Okay.
So then it's the bus garage.
Sure. I actually think you're thinking about this the right way. You're asking the right questions, because when you stand here and observe people coming through here, it becomes very logical. Like, yeah, there's concentrations of people that live there. They actually want to get there. To me, that is the brilliant question that transportation planners should be asking. It's like, okay, we screwed that up, right? Like, we didn't contemplate that, but now people are doing it. So what do we do? We were just talking about Disney a minute ago. There's a great story of the early days of the theme park, where Waltz is out walking around in the morning and these people are putting up a fence. He's like, what are you doing? Well, people keep cutting through the grass and we're trying to keep them on the sidewalk. No, people are telling you where they want to go. Rip out the sidewalk, put it in there, and change it. So you actually have a problem here. I think your solution seems like one that is certainly worthy of trying. I wonder if there's almost even like an interim step we can do to help out a little bit. Is there a way we can, you know, people come down this sidewalk and then it's done? Is it, they get stranded right there?
They do. The sidewalk picks up and goes west from here, but this is it.
So I wonder if at that sidewalk we could almost like paint something out a little bit. You know, you've got the
path right here.
Here is the path. So I wonder if there's a way we could.
So kind of
make that a little bit
similar
better.
To your notion on Vernon of, hey, start with some bollards or cones or something,
Right.
just and play with it for a little period of time and
Exactly.
see how it works.
What can go wrong doing that?
Until you figure out what works, and
Right.
then make it permanent.
Yeah, because like here comes a group of kids, you know, they'll maybe come through here. For them, walking through here is not going to be pleasant, but they're kids. They're going to be able to do it. What happens when you get the elderly woman trying to come through here, or the mom with the stroller or what have you? Then could we make this a little bit better? It's interesting because I'm guessing cars don't come flying through here.
It's leftover space. There used to be a car wash, and that went away, and so they have an agreement with the medical facility to park back here.
Yeah.
Leftover space.
I just wonder if there's a way, even like temporary, like if we could almost like, because there's tons of room here. I wonder if you could move this parking back, like squeeze it in 10, 15 feet this way, and like,
The walkway could be up there.
you know, take this little bit of concrete here, and you know, bring it in here, and just give them a little bit of pat. Then now you got them up to there. Now how do you get them? You see what I'm saying? I think if you play around with those things,
And test it out.
test it out, and then see, you know, do we do that, and then all of a sudden we come back a year from now, and instead of 20 people a day, there's 40 people a day. Well, now we know, okay, that worked, and people are using it. So what's the next thing we can do? Maybe then we plant trees through here to give them some shade. And you see how we can incrementally start making it a little bit better?
Almost like the picture in Memphis of the
Exactly.
they created this buffer with the cars parking and then a pedestrian
Yep.
walkway.
Exactly.
Well, your next event starts in 5 minutes.
All right, we
So
better
we might
get
want to
there.
get you moving over
Try
there.
this beaten path.
Yeah,
you
we can
tread
walk
right
on the
across
beaten
there.
path. Yeah, I think we should probably experience it.
And we'll meet the band over there.
Thank you to the city of Edina and the Facebook world for hanging out with us today. How many people we got right now?
12.
12. We were up over 30 earlier today. All right, thank you everybody. Take care.